Hi guys, welcome back to Mind Over Metal, here again with another cheeky little video for you. Today we're going to go over calories and basic nutrition. Quite a lot of people seem to be quite confused about how to improve their eating, especially when it comes to working towards their specific goals. And I've been asked by a few people to just talk about generally the importance of eating and making sure you're getting a good number of calories in, regardless of what your goals actually are. So we're going to spend a bit of time going over that, and hopefully you might be able to take away some useful information from this. Fingers crossed anyway.
I appreciate counting calories might be a slightly sensitive subject for some. There's no denying that the fitness community, the health and fitness community in general, is rife with eating disorders, because it is. Let's be honest about it, let's call it what it is. A lot of people out there don't eat properly because they believe eating improperly will be more efficient in terms of getting them to their goals. If you're trying to lose weight, starving yourself is a quick way to lose weight, of course it is. If you're trying to build muscle, force feeding yourself is a very quick way to gain mass, of course it is. Now, I think it's pretty objective to say we all are aware that these are not healthy practices, but I think until it's really put into perspective how to do it correctly, it still just seems like the most efficient way. Not ideal, certainly not ideal. So let's go over some basics. Let's start with how to work out how many calories your body currently needs to sustain itself, to sustain its current mass. This is what we would refer to as your maintenance.
Now, how do we work out our current maintenance calories? I'm glad you asked. So, we could look into how to work out your basal metabolic rate, which is how many calories your body burns just by existing, natural bodily function, respiration and perspiration, organ function and all that, plus your activity level, which essentially takes your BMR and times it by a certain percentage to give you a rough estimate for your total daily energy expenditure, which is the number we're looking for. Rather than all that nonsense, we're just going to go to Google, we're going to type in TDEE calculate. This is going to give you 100,000, maybe more, different web pages with what is essentially the same online form for you to fill out. It's going to ask you your height, your weight, your age, your birth sex, a rough estimate of your body fat percentage, which you don't need to know. Obviously, most people have no idea, and that's absolutely fine. It's just to make it as accurate, pinpoint accurate as it possibly can be. For the average person, it's irrelevant. As well as a generalized estimation of your activity level. Now, it'll probably say something like lightly active, somewhat active, moderately active, very active, extremely active. Obviously, depending on what you put in there, it will dramatically affect how many calories it estimates you should be eating to maintain your body weight. So let's be reasonable. This could be a learning process for us, figuring out just what our level of activity is considered in the grand scheme of things. Taking the dog for a walk an hour a day, 7 days a week, that is good activity, but it's very low intensity. So it would still sit lower on the scale than maybe three days a week intense weight training, for example. That's a higher level of physical exertion, therefore greater level of activity, therefore you need more calories. Go online, get on Google right now, work out your TDEE. There you go, you've got your maintenance calories. Nice. Okay, so we now know our maintenance calories. Next question is, how do we manipulate them to better progress towards our goals? So let's start off with probably the most common goal is losing a little bit of weight. Generally speaking, you want to put yourself in a caloric deficit, which is done both through introducing greater levels of activity, i.e. joining the gym, starting to work out, and restrictive dieting. Not overly restrictive. We're not trying to hate life by eating cardboard all day, every day, but we do have to be mindful about what we're putting in our bodies. So, generally speaking, I would suggest, for the average person at least, a 300 calorie deficit. Now, back in the day, it would have been touted as a 500 calorie deficit, but I think we've come far enough now to understand that that isn't sustainable for most people. That aggressive change in physical activity as well is already putting you in a deficit. You're already burning more calories than you were, so your maintenance is now no longer correct. You are in a deficit compared to that simply through the activity that you're doing. If you're restricting yourself by 500 calories as well as that, well, you could be closer to 1,000 calorie deficit if you're really amping up the activity. And it's just far too much. It's not sustainable. It's legitimately dangerous to an extent. You can really do yourself some damage. So we want to make it more reasonable, more manageable. You don't want to be tired. You don't want to be dragging yourself to the gym thinking, oh my God, I ache, I'm tired, I don't want to do this, blah, blah, blah. That's not sustainable. That doesn't sound like fun. That sounds like a poor quality of life for me. Eat that little bit more, get those calories in, get the fuel in the tank. You'll have the energy, you'll have the focus. You are going to still see fantastic progress, and you're going to progress quicker to your goal. You're far more likely to reach your goal simply because you're less likely to fall off the wagon because you made it too hard for yourself from the start. Make sure you're eating enough, regardless of whether or not you're trying to lose weight. You should still be eating quality food and a significant number of calories. You never want to hyper restrict yourself because that's starvation, and that's fucking dumb. Now conversely, if you're actively trying to put on weight, let's say you consider yourself quite underweight and you just want to be bigger or stronger, a bit more muscular, a bit more athletic, then you need to be in a caloric surplus. And again, I would suggest a 300 calorie surplus. It's not huge. You shouldn't realistically struggle to get that extra amount of food down, although obviously you'll be a bit more full than normal. And you shouldn't find that you're packing on a lot of fat. Now, it is borderline impossible to build muscle without putting on a bit of fat, but if you're that underweight, you can probably afford to and really not negatively affect your physique. Let's assume you're training for a physique specifically. If you're very, very underweight, well, sometimes a little bit of extra fat, or at least the muscle glycogen that comes with it, can give you a look of fullness and thickness that a lot of people find very desirable, especially these days. And with that in mind, I think it's very important to remember, whether you're a guy or a girl, you should be loving your body, or at least loving yourself. If you dislike your body, that is not an excuse to treat it poorly. You can take it from someone who has treated themselves very poorly in the past. Doing so only leads to greater levels of self-resentment. I have had terrible, terrible eating habits in the past, thinking I was working real hard. You're not working hard, you're fucking killing yourself. You're being an idiot. Stop it. It's not hard work to starve yourself. It's hard work to stick to the plan and trust the fucking process. That's the hard part. So if you end up doing something similar to what I was doing, we'll get into it, by the way, you're only going to come out the other end feeling worse. Not only are you going to feel like shit, you're probably going to look like shit too, because you haven't actually done to your body what you thought you were going to do. Now, don't get me wrong, it doesn't mean that you have to eat the exact same thing every single day in the exact same portions. You absolutely can, and probably should, allow for a level of flexibility in your diet. Sometimes you want to eat the tastier food rather than the healthier food. Sometimes you're going to go out for a meal, sometimes you're going to go to the pub and you're going to have a pint. Well, you know, is it good for you? No, objectively. Physically anyway. Maybe it's really good for your mental health. Maybe that's how you blow off some steam. Maybe these are the parts of your life that you don't want to change, and instead you want to accommodate with, you know, better dieting outside of that or greater physical activity. So don't feel like you can't allow yourself little bits of enjoyment in your life. This isn't supposed to replace the life that you have. It's supposed to improve it. It's supposed to add something positive to it. No one's expecting you to go from average Joe, wait, get it, Joe, to Arnold Schwarzenegger overnight. It just doesn't happen. It's not sustainable. To suddenly start training and eating like a bodybuilder after 10, 15, 20 years of eating like shit and not working out, you think that's going to last? I don't think it's going to last. So just remember, it's okay to be flexible with your diet, or at least allowing yourself to be flexible with your diet, you know? You can have a bit more food today if you're unusually hungry. You can potentially have a little bit less tomorrow, or you can change what you're eating tomorrow to accommodate that slightly higher influx of calories. We're not saying eat the exact same thing every day, because it sucks, it's boring, it's really, really boring. You want to be enjoying your life. Getting fit isn't about no longer enjoying life. Everything I do in the gym is to aid my life outside of the gym. Everything I do in here is to improve my quality of life overall, whether that be my physical ability, my cardiovascular endurance, my sense of self, you know, my self-esteem. If I can become a bit more muscular and a bit leaner, I'm sure I'd feel better about myself, because that's a personal goal of mine. But I also want to enjoy my food, and eating is something I'm pretty good at, so I ain't gonna stop anytime soon. I love ice cream, I love biscuits, I love cake, I fucking love cake. So I have to work pretty hard to make sure that I can justify that without, you know, being a detriment to myself later in life. I like to consider myself in, you know, reasonably good shape, but I certainly enjoy an Oreo here and there, as everyone has the right to. So don't be restrictive, don't be silly about it, don't be skipping meals and refusing to snack despite the fact you're starving in between meals, because that's not good for your physical or your mental health. Hey, my clothes have changed. How did that happen? Anyway, doesn't matter. The point is, you need to be looking after yourself, not just physically, but also mentally, and food plays a massive role in that. So don't, please, for the love of God, regardless of what your goals are, don't be starving yourself. If you are trying desperately to cut some weight, make it sustainable, please, because otherwise 6 weeks from now, when you've inevitably fallen off the wagon and you've binged and binged and binged, not only have you put all that fat back on, you're probably in a worse place than when you started, both physically and mentally. Please keep on top of your cravings and fuel your system when the machine tells you it needs fuel. It's that simple. If you have hunger signals, likelihood is we've either not eaten enough or the food we have eaten is not calorically dense enough to fuel the machine. Get the food in regardless of your goals. It is so important, guys. You cannot starve yourself.